Good morning, you beautiful people. So today, if you are ending your games in frustration because you felt like you just completely botched your deployment and that is why you lost the game, this video is for you. I got you. So I have probably played 200 plus games now, 10th edition, as a Necron player. So I feel like at this point, I bring a lot of knowledge to the table that I simply just want to package together and pass on to you, because I really do believe if one of us gets better, then we all get better as a community. So I think that's the biggest goal for this channel, and the fact that I just love this game. So today we're going to be going over some high-level deployment strategies for Starshatter Arsenal and exactly how I deploy my most recent list on the tabletop. And if you haven't seen that list or that list breakdown, I'm going to go ahead and provide a link for that at the end of this video so you can go and check that out. But my biggest goal for this video today is, even if you are not a Necron player, you can still get a lot of value out of this if you play another army, right? So if you're playing CSM, if you're playing Thousand Suns, if you're playing Guard, hopefully these concepts you can apply to your list and your deployment, and you become a better player as well. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about before we even deploy, okay, are some kind of pregame questions. Now, if we look at the layout here, we have layout 1 and tipping point. And I apologize, the sun is just like blaring into this right now, so I'm just going to adjust this on the fly here. Okay, there we go. Sorry, so my face isn't blown out here. Okay, so let's get back to it. So layout 1, tipping point. And so first questions that I'm asking myself is, 1, does my opponent have infiltrators? Okay, so if you don't already know, we are running flayed ones in this list, and I think in every Necron list, you should have a unit of infiltrators, which is the flayed ones. They help in a lot of matchups. They offer you forward board presence. I could spend an entire video just talking about infiltrators, so I'm not going to go deep on that, but since we're talking about deployment, but they are great. So let's just assume in this context for learning today, your opponent also has infiltrators. So you go up to the table, you roll off, see who goes first, and you get a 5, he gets a 3, and you get to select who wants to go first. So in general, if they have infiltrators, you want to deploy first, okay? So because you won the roll-off, we are going to start with our unit of flayed ones, right? So there's a couple spots we can put the flayed ones, but in general on this layout, this is usually a very good spot for them, and I'm going to tell you why. So the biggest thing in Warhammer is you have to think about as well what your opponent can draw for secondaries on their first turn, okay? And the two biggest ones that you want to avoid them scoring on are Storm Hostile and Overwhelming Force, right? Because they involve units being on the objective, okay? So hypothetically, somewhat of newer players, they might put their flayed ones up here because you're like, yo, they're farther up, they're behind a wall, you keep them 1 inch away so they can't be tagged. But the problem is if you line them on the objective and your opponent goes first, and let's just say they draw Overwhelming Force and Storm Hostile, you basically just gave them a free 7 points. And they're going to love you for it. So don't do that. Keep them off the objective, okay? And the reason why we're putting them here is if you think about it as well. So let's just say, well, what if I just put them forward and just put them behind the wall here? Well, the problem is, again, is that you're making it easier for your opponent to also shoot these guys, right? So let's just say I play against my buddy Tom all the time, plays Guard, okay? And Guard have a lot of forward pressure. There's a lot of armies that have a lot of forward pressure. Votan, Admech, right? They have a lot of units that can deploy on the line or infiltrate, and they can realistically get over in this area on your strong side that first turn. So if you put your flayed ones here, what's going to happen? They're just going to shoot them off the objective, right? But if you put them here, right, then all of a sudden when they move up their vehicles, if let's just say now all of a sudden instead of drawing a line from here, now they actually have to enter the footprint to kill these guys, okay? Now, why that is very significant is because of the fact that if they are in the footprint, then now all of a sudden all these units here that you have also deployed can kill them extremely easily. So your opponent has to think twice about, do I want to go after these like 60 points of flayed ones or do I not? If you put them here, now because they're wholly within the terrain, they can put units here, right? And then just shoot them off. And then what is that causes a problem, right? Because now all of your units here, right? They can't shoot them. So just those little things are going to massively help your game to think about. And, it'll come second nature. Like these are very high level things I feel like to think about right now. And this is one of the biggest things why I love this game so much is because on a surface level, it's very simple. But just these little things, just with this one unit of infiltrators and how many different variations you can have and why specifically this is your probably best option in most matchups is good, okay? So let's move on here. So that was going to be kind of the longer one to talk about. The rest of these are going to be a little bit easier, okay? So let's go into now our home field. So we got our infiltrators out of the way. Now we're going to lock down our home field, okay? And the reason for that is we want to give our opponent the least amount of information up front. And what I mean by that is you do not want to deploy your Silent King. You do not want to deploy your 6 brick of Locust Heavy Destroyers because that is the main thing that your opponent wants to go after. Like they want to get that like just potentially off the board. So giving your opponent the least amount of information of what you're doing in the beginning is going to help you out in the long run. So generally after infiltrators, you want to go start deploying your home field. So we're going to put our first Hexmark Destroyer over here. Hexmark Destroyer is, he's a great anchor piece. He has Lone Op to protect you from indirect. He has the free Overwatch threat, so he can threaten like over here, if your opponent drops something in, and he's able usually to screen out the 9 back here, depending on the deployment. So great little spot for him. And then we're going to put, move back here. Sorry about that. All right, then we're going to put Imhotep right here. And he's our great CP farm. And this is kind of our anchor piece for the home field. I talk about this in the list breakdown a little bit more. So if you want to check that out, I'll link it at the end. But quick synopsis is a lot of times even though this is OC2, if a unit drops in here, they can shoot one unit, but they can't usually shoot both and kill them. And so you're still going to hold the point, and then they just kind of sacrifice that unit more or less for nothing because of the new 6-inch deep strike rules. So this, I feel like, is a pretty strong package in the current meta to hold your objective and still get some good efficiency out of it, or at least has worked so well so far in Starshatter. So moving on, next we are going to probably deploy either like the Scorpex. Oh, geez, I apologize. This is there we go. Okay. We're going to deploy the Scorpex probably next. So we're going to put them right here. Okay. So thought process here, especially with the Scorpex, is think about the role they have in the list. So the Scorpex, I know specifically, I'm like, hey, they're just an early game trade piece. I want to just use them as a mission play tool or a harassment tool for the center objective. And so essentially I know the first turn, they're just going to more or less just stage behind this wall, and they have an 8-inch movement. So it's enough to get basically here and then a very easy charge to threaten this objective. They could potentially threaten this objective over here, but they don't quite have enough movement unless your opponent is really pressing up here, and good opponents aren't going to do that. They're mainly going to stack a lot of their OC right here. And so it's just kind of out of the question for Scorpex to really do anything other than threaten this objective right here, okay? So Scorpex are going to go there. Next up, we need to start thinking about how we're going to score our secondaries first turn. So a lot of high-level players talk about this. I'm not the first one to, but I appreciate you listening again, or maybe you haven't heard it before. So the biggest things that we're thinking about, how we can score turn 1. How am I going to score area denial? How am I going to score containment? How am I going to score locus? How am I going to score recover assets and sabotage? These things you need to think about. These things are absolutely crucial when you are deploying. They will make or break a game if you do not think about these things beforehand. So going into that, so we're thinking about, right, area denial. That is a great reason why these flayed ones and infiltrators are so good, because if you draw area denial the first turn, all they got to do, they just got to walk over here. You get area denial. Let's say you get secure no man's land. They just walk over here, get secure no man's land, or walk over here, get secure no man's land. Let's say you draw cleanse, right? All those objectives, these flayed ones are able to get very easily and for a minimum amount of points. You want to, essentially in the early game, those first like 2 or 3 turns, you're really trying to maximize your secondary points while trading the least amount of points to your opponent, okay, is usually the goal. So going up next, we're going to start thinking about more like little pieces here. So I should also preface, you should probably already have nominated what's going to be in reserve. So let's just say, like in this game, I'm going to have my Locust Brick with the 6 Locust Destroyers in reserve. We're going to have a unit of 2 Emidics in reserve, and we're going to have a unit of Tomb Blades. And I'll explain why they're in reserve at the end. So that's our reserve package up there, okay? So next up, we are going to deploy our unit of 1 Emidic, okay? So we're going to put that Emidic right here, okay? Reason for that is, again, what's its role? If your opponent comes out, they're going to put something annoying like on this objective. They're going to put Jackals on here. They're going to put some Scouts. They're going to put some Poxwalkers. You know, they're potentially going to put some JPIs or, you know, some Gretchen, right? And so what's really nice about this unit of 1 is it works really well with the Silent King. You essentially just move up this unit, and then he fires at some stuff, and then you indirect, and it's usually enough in the early game to kill some resources. So we're going to put him right there. It maximizes his potential because he can move out, fire this way, or fire this way, okay? Next up, I would put probably start bringing out the Tomb Blades and the Stalkers. So we're going to put 1 Stalker right here, okay? The Stalker has Scout, okay? So a very important thing to think about with scouting units is you always want to think about where they are going or where they're going to scout to, whether you go first or second, right? So if I go first or second, he's basically guaranteed going to go over here because it's before you know what your secondary missions are, and it keeps him safe, okay? So you're basically getting him up the table, but it's still in a very safe position where your opponent really has to commit to try to kill this resource, okay? So first Stalker is going to go right there. Let's say next up we're going to deploy our second Stalker. Oh, I apologize again. Boop. Second Stalker is going to go right here. We'll bring this down, okay? And same thing. So if I go first, depending on the matchup, I might push him up to here probably. If I go second, I might just keep him there, okay? Reason for that is because there's a pretty nasty firing line down here. So your opponent could put like some anti-tank or something right here or right here, and they could swing out and get this guy and then just essentially trade him for nothing, which usually doesn't feel good. So really we're just thinking about, okay, if I go first, he's going to scout up to here. If I go second, he probably just stays there. All right. Next, we are going to deploy probably our Tomb Blades, which are also going to go over here. Now, with this setup here, a lot of times the Tomb Blades can actually fit kind of next to the Stalker. And the reason why we're putting the Tomb Blades here is they also scout 9. Now, this is what I was talking about on the list breakdown that's really good with this package is depending on if you go first or second, if you go second, right, you're going to have bottom turn scoring, and your opponent is going to have some sort of resource back here, right? This is probably going to be their strong anchor piece for their list. And over here, this is going to be my strong anchor piece, right? And so the first turn, they're going to put something on this objective. It's going to be probably something durable or something annoying. It could be a Rhino. It could be some Terminators. It could be, it could be a ton of different things, right? But they are going to most likely put something on this objective the first turn because they want to get primary points, right? Now, what puts your opponent in a little bit of a predicament here, and why I love these stalkers, is a lot of times they'll like tow in like a rhino or something like that, and the rhino's only 2 OC. So when they ask, they're like, oh, how much OC is that stalker? And you're like, well, it's 4. And they're like, how fast does it move? And you're like, well, it scouts 8, it moves 8, and I can advance it. And they're like, I see. So that's where stalkers come into play, where they force in the Tomb Blade packages. It forces your opponent to have to commit a lot more to their natural expansion early than maybe they would feel comfortable doing. And that is the biggest thing with Starshatter as well, is you kind of want to get the game going and having your opponent exposing things early so that you can shoot at them. Because if you don't force your opponent to shoot at anything, then you're not going to get max value out of your units, mainly the King, the Doomsday Ark, and the Brick of 6 Locust Destroyers, right? You're not giving them a reason to come out. And that's why I really do like the Stalkers so far in Starshatter, because they're very durable for their points, and your opponent has to commit more to killing that resource than they would like. And when they do, the clapback a lot of times hurts. So we're going to put this package here. And then now basically all we have left is the King and the Doomsday Ark. So all of our kind of big resources. And these 4 units basically live together, okay? So next up, depending on the matchup, the Doomsday Ark in general is probably going to hang out over here. So we probably deploy, or I probably would deploy the Doomsday Ark last. So let's do this first. So what I think about with this package is I think about where the King is going. So I'm not deploying the King yet, but more or less mentally, I'm like, okay, I know the King is going to go right here, right on the line, because I know that I want to advance him and get him on this objective the first turn, okay? Because he's the anchor piece in the list. So what I want to do is, knowing that, I want to deploy all of this stuff around it. So we're going to put the Hex Mark first. We'll just put him right here because he has Lone Op. Not a super big deal. We'll put him behind the wall. Also, I'm putting him intentionally here because the Reanimator and the Spider cannot normally go through walls. So if, let's just say in hindsight, like with a newer player, I could see sometimes what would happen is they deploy like a Spider here and they have the King here, and then you'll kind of notice you parking a lot yourself, because then you either have to spend a CP to have the Spider go through a wall, or now he's got to go all the way around the wall to get over here, right? So we don't want to do that. So backing up here, Hexmark's going to go here. And then we're just going to deploy basically one after another. We're just going to deploy this package essentially right here, and it's going to look like this, okay? So we'll probably put the Spider here, because the only downside of the Spider is it's slow. It's only movement 5, which is a little sad, but, it is what it is. So we have this package here, and then we put the King here, okay? So we get all the auras, and then we'll put the Doomsday Ark, at least in this matchup, over here. There's a couple good spots for Doomsday Arks. Main reason putting him over here is he's going to stay out of this line. You could advance him up, and then he covers. This is a really nasty firing lane here. You could go here and fire down. Also a really good spot for him, honestly, could be right here as well. Because you can, essentially shift out here, fire this way. You can move through the wall. I mean, this is what makes Starshatter just so nasty, and owning this lane or firing up this way. Okay, so there's a couple options for this. Breakdown. We'll put him right here. Okay, because he also offers like a nice screening back here as well. And the biggest thing as well that I'm thinking about, again, so let's think about, so with this breakdown, this is our final deployment. Okay, and then we have these units in reserve. Okay. So let's just go through the secondary cards. Okay, Area Denial, first turn, how are we scoring it? Boom. Flayed Ones right here. Cleanse, how are we scoring it? Boom, boom, right here. Secure No Man's Land, how are we scoring it? Boom, boom, right here. Containment, how are we scoring it? Hexmark goes over here. Holy Within 9. Tomb Blades or Stalker over here, right? Holy Within 9. Boom, boom, easy. How are we scoring Recover Assets? We have double Hexmark, right? So, boom, King shifts up here. Hexmark goes over here, right? Boom, we got Recover Assets. Sabotage, how are we getting that? Well, We're gonna Silent King. He could even move up. This is probably too far away for him to move up to clip this objective, but we could probably sabotage with a stalker potentially. Okay. We could sabotage with the flayed ones. I don't generally love sabotage. If I can cycle it, I will. That's a pretty risky card a lot of times, especially against good opponents. So recover is a little bit more doable. Recover assets is a little tricky, especially on this layout. Your best bet is probably having the Scorpex or like Imhotech doing it right here. As you can see, there's a little pocket. So that would probably be your best bet, is just doing something right here with recover assets. So now that we got basically our secondaries out of it, that is the biggest thing when it comes to deployment. So screenshot this, rewind it back, rewatch it again, just kind of get that ingrained in your mind. And then to finish things off here, let's just talk about deployment in terms of reserves. So we have these units up in reserve mainly for ingress threats and where people are going to put damage. So as the game goes on, you're going to see, maybe they stack higher over here, or maybe they're pushing harder over here, right? Or they're pushing harder in the middle. The 6 Locust Brick, they can kind of exist on their own. I mean, of course, they are better if they're next to the king, but because they have the innate full rerolls, it gives you the flexibility where like, oh, crap, okay, my opponent is like really pressing over this way. So it gives you the flexibility to, drop the Locust Brick in here or drop it over here, depending on how much you're pressed forward and getting shots this way. Or you could drop the Emetics, the unit of 2 down here, something like that. You need stuff here. So, or the Tomb Blades. The Tomb Blades is a really nasty ingress threat, right? So maybe turn 3, they left something open here. They're OC6. You ingress them here, and then on your turn, you're able to move them 12, and then fire and fade, and you deny them primary there, right? So it gives you options. But in general, this is the deployment breakdown for Starshatter Arsenal, and this is how I'm deploying this current list. I'm going to go ahead again and link the list breakdown to this. So go ahead. It should be like up there somewhere. Of this list if you want to check that out. But appreciate y'all watching, and until the next one.